Vito Genovese was not born into power. He was born into poverty and chaos in 1918 in Risigliano, Italy. From a young age, he learned that survival depended on strength, fear, and loyalty to the wrong people. Italy at the time was harsh for poor families, and crime was often the fastest way out. When Genovese immigrated to the United States as a child, he carried those lessons with him. He settled in New York City, where Italian gangs ruled entire neighborhoods. Violence was common, and law enforcement was weak. Young Vito quickly learned that respect was taken, not given. He joined street gangs and began stealing, intimidating, and fighting rivals. These early years shaped his ruthless personality. He did not care about honor or tradition, only power. This mindset would later separate him from other mafia bosses, who still pretended to follow old codes. Even as a teenager, Genovese showed extreme ambition and cruelty. He wasn't loud or flashy. He watched, waited, and struck when needed. The streets of New York became his classroom, teaching him how fear controls people better than money. This was the foundation of a criminal empire that would terrorize America for decades. In New York, Genovese became deeply involved in organized crime circles connected to Italian immigrants. He ran errands, collected debts, and carried out beatings for older gangsters. These tasks taught him discipline and secrecy. Unlike reckless criminals, Genovese preferred planning over chaos. He studied how protection rackets worked, how bribery controlled police officers, and how violence could be used quietly. During this time, he crossed paths with early mafia figures who would later become legends. He learned that loyalty was temporary and betrayal was inevitable. This belief made him extremely dangerous. He trusted no one fully. Genovese became known for his cold stare and sudden rage. Witnesses later said he could switch from calm to deadly in seconds. He began making money through extortion, gambling, and robbery. These were not small crimes. Entire neighborhoods lived in fear. Shop owners paid money just to stay alive. Genovese understood something crucial. Fear creates obedience. This lesson would define his leadership style later. He was not interested in fame. He wanted control. Every crime he committed added to his reputation as someone not to cross. By his early 20s, he was already feared by men much older than him. This was only the beginning. Vito Genovese's life changed when he became involved with the Italian mafia structure forming in America. This was no longer random street crime. It was organized, disciplined, and strategic. He aligned himself with powerful figures like Giuseppe "Joe the Boss" Masseria, one of New York's most feared crime leaders. Masseria controlled gambling, bootlegging, and extortion across the city. Genovese became one of his most trusted enforcers. His job was simple: eliminate problems. That meant threatening rivals, punishing disloyal members, and enforcing Masseria's rules. Genovese proved extremely effective. He showed no hesitation when ordered to hurt or kill. This made him valuable. Other gangsters feared him, but Masseria rewarded him. Genovese learned how mafia families were structured: bosses, underbosses, soldiers, and associates. He also learned the weaknesses of the system. He saw how ambition caused internal wars. Instead of being loyal to people, Genovese became loyal to opportunity. He began quietly planning his rise. Even while serving Masseria, he watched for moments to climb higher. This calculated mindset made him one of the most dangerous mafia figures of his era. When Prohibition began in 1920, Genovese's world exploded with opportunity. Alcohol was illegal, but demand was massive. Criminals who controlled alcohol became rich and powerful. Genovese jumped fully into bootlegging. He helped smuggle, transport, and distribute illegal liquor across New York. This was not small-scale crime. It was industrial-level operations involving trucks, warehouses, and corrupt officials. Violence was common. Rival gangs fought over territory, and Genovese was always at the center. He organized hits, ambushes, and intimidation campaigns. Police officers were bribed or threatened. Judges were influenced. Bootlegging turned Genovese into a millionaire criminal. More importantly, it taught him how money buys protection. He learned that crime was not just about violence, it was about systems. This lesson hardened him further. Death became routine. He ordered murders without emotion. Bootlegging also connected him to other rising mafia figures, including Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello. These relationships would later reshape American organized crime forever. Lucky Luciano recognized Genovese's intelligence and brutality. Unlike traditional mafia leaders, Luciano wanted modernization. Genovese fit perfectly into this vision. Together, they began challenging old mafia traditions. They believed crime should function like a business, not a family feud. Genovese became Luciano's right-hand man. He handled enforcement, discipline, and violent operations. Luciano trusted Genovese to eliminate threats quietly. This partnership was deadly effective. They expanded gambling, prostitution, and bootlegging networks. Genovese learned leadership at the highest level. He watched how Luciano manipulated alliances and crushed enemies. However, Genovese was not satisfied being second. Deep inside, he wanted absolute control. This ambition would eventually tear alliances apart. But at this stage, Genovese was rising fast. His name spread across the underworld. People whispered it with fear. Law enforcement began noticing him, but proving crimes was difficult. Genovese left no witnesses. One of the most infamous crimes in mafia history involved Vito Genovese directly. Joe Masseria had become a liability. His leadership was outdated, and he was blocking younger criminals like Luciano and Genovese. A decision was made. Masseria had to die. Genovese played a key role in setting up the betrayal. In 1931, Masseria was lured to a restaurant in New York. While playing cards, he was shot to death. The killers included men connected to Luciano's faction. This murder ended one era of the mafia and began another. Genovese learned a critical lesson. Bosses are not permanent. Power belongs to those who take it. The killing shocked the underworld. It proved that no one was untouchable. Genovese's reputation grew darker. He was now known as a man involved in removing bosses. That reputation followed him forever. After Masseria's death, the mafia structure changed completely. Lucky Luciano became the most powerful figure in American organized crime. Genovese was rewarded with high-ranking positions and greater control. He now had soldiers, territories, and income streams under him. Gambling operations expanded, prostitution rings flourished, extortion became more organized. Genovese enforced discipline brutally. Anyone who disobeyed was punished severely. He did not hesitate to order murders. His leadership style was based on fear, not respect. Other mafia members obeyed because they were terrified. Genovese enjoyed this control. However, law enforcement pressure increased. The government slowly began understanding organized crime. Genovese had to become more careful. But violence remained his primary tool. His ambition continued to grow. Power created enemies. Frank Costello, another major mafia figure, also rose under Luciano. Costello preferred diplomacy and political influence. Genovese preferred violence. This tension split the mafia internally. Alliances shifted. Genovese began plotting his next move. He wanted total control of the family. This rivalry would later explode into assassination attempts and betrayals. At this stage, Genovese was patient. He waited, he watched, he prepared. In the early 1930s, Genovese was charged with murder in the United States. Rather than face trial, he fled to Italy. This move showed his intelligence and cowardice at the same time. In Italy, he aligned himself with Benito Mussolini's fascist government. He used money to buy protection and influence. Genovese continued criminal activities overseas, including drug trafficking. He even ordered murders from abroad. Italy became a temporary safe haven, but he never stopped watching America. He planned his return. Power was waiting. Even in exile, Genovese never rested. He maintained contact with Mafia figures in America. He studied political changes, law enforcement strategies, and internal Mafia conflicts. His mind was always working. He believed destiny favored him. This belief drove every decision. He was patient, calculating, and ruthless. Vito Genovese was not finished. He was just getting started. While hiding in Italy, Vito Genovese did not become quiet or lawful. Instead, he adapted. He used money, fear, and connections to survive under Benito Mussolini's fascist government. Genovese presented himself as a respectable businessman, but behind closed doors, he continued criminal operations. He became involved in black market trading, smuggling, and drug trafficking between Europe and the United States. Genovese understood that dictatorships thrive on corruption, and he exploited that weakness. He bribed officials and aligned himself with local fascist leaders. In return, he received protection from arrest and extradition. During this period, Genovese ordered the murder of an anti-fascist journalist, Carlo Tresca, who was outspoken against Italian criminal networks. Although Genovese denied involvement, later investigations linked him to the killing. This showed his reach extended far beyond American streets. He learned how political power and crime could merge into one system. Italy became a testing ground for his future rule, crime hidden behind respectability and political silence. Genovese's most profitable crime was narcotics. Even before drugs became a major mafia business, he recognized their potential. While in Italy, he helped establish heroin trafficking routes between Sicily, Naples, and New York. This early system laid the groundwork for what later became the global heroin trade. Genovese worked with Sicilian mafia figures who controlled poppy fields and labs. The drugs were smuggled using shipping routes disguised as legitimate cargo. This operation required extreme secrecy. Anyone suspected of talking was eliminated. Genovese proved again that violence was his preferred enforcement method. The profits were enormous. Drug money flowed quietly while law enforcement focused on bootlegging. This decision would later define Genovese's legacy. He was one of the men who pushed the American mafia deeply into narcotics, despite public claims that the mafia avoided drugs. He lied openly while making millions. World War II changed everything. Mussolini fell, and Italy became unsafe for Genovese. He surrendered to American forces, hoping to clear his name. Due to weak evidence and missing witnesses, the murder charges against him collapsed. Genovese returned to the United States a free man. This moment shocked law enforcement. A known killer had escaped justice. Back in New York, he found a changed mafia landscape. Lucky Luciano had been imprisoned and later deported. Frank Costello had taken control of the Luciano family. Genovese felt robbed. He believed the power should have been his. From that moment, his goal became clear: remove Costello and take the throne. Unlike street wars, this conflict was silent and strategic. Genovese did not rush. He rebuilt alliances slowly. He gathered loyal soldiers and influenced capos. Costello relied on political connections and bribery. Genovese relied on fear. He spread rumors, challenged decisions, and weakened Costello's support. The mafia became divided. Meetings grew tense. Everyone knew violence was coming. Genovese waited for the perfect moment. He understood that killing Costello outright would cause chaos. Instead, he planned to cripple him psychologically. This patience made Genovese extremely dangerous. In 1957, Genovese made his move. A gunman shot Frank Costello in the head outside his apartment. Miraculously, Costello survived, but survival was not victory. The message was clear. Costello stepped down from leadership shortly afterward. Genovese achieved his goal without a public war. This assassination attempt shocked the Mafia. It proved Genovese was willing to kill bosses. Fear spread quickly. Members aligned with him out of self-preservation. Law enforcement suspected Genovese but lacked evidence. Once again, he escaped consequences. After Costello stepped aside, Vito Genovese took control of the family, later named after him. He believed he was now the ultimate Mafia ruler, the boss of bosses. Unlike Luciano, who favored cooperation, Genovese ruled through intimidation. He centralized power. Decisions flowed only through him. Dissent was punished. Several rivals were murdered or disappeared. His leadership created resentment, but fear kept people silent. Genovese believed absolute control was the only safe path. This arrogance would later be his downfall. Under Genovese's leadership, gambling operations expanded massively. Illegal casinos, betting rings, and numbers games flooded New York and beyond. He also strengthened extortion rackets targeting unions, construction companies, and businesses. Workers were threatened. Employers were forced to cooperate. Money flowed upward to Genovese. He demanded loyalty and payment. Anyone who resisted was beaten or killed. These crimes affected thousands of ordinary people. Entire industries were controlled by fear. Genovese became richer and more powerful than ever. In 1957, Genovese made a critical mistake. He organized a massive mafia meeting in Appalachian, New York. Dozens of top mob bosses attended. Local police noticed suspicious activity and raided the gathering. Mobsters fled into the woods. Many were arrested. This event exposed the Mafia's existence to the public. Newspapers exploded with headlines. Genovese denied involvement, but everyone knew he organized it. This embarrassment weakened his authority. Law enforcement now openly targeted organized crime. Genovese had underestimated public exposure. After Appalachian, Genovese's enemies saw opportunity. Other mafia leaders resented his tyranny. They feared his ambition. Secretly, they began plotting against him. Unlike previous rivals, these enemies were insiders. Trust collapsed. Meetings grew tense. Everyone knew violence was coming. Genovese waited for the perfect moment. He understood that killing Costello outright would cause chaos. Instead, he planned to cripple him psychologically. This patience made Genovese extremely dangerous. In 1957, Genovese made his move. A gunman shot Frank Costello in the head outside his apartment. Miraculously, Costello survived, but survival was not victory. The message was clear. Costello stepped down from leadership shortly afterward. Genovese achieved his goal without a public war. This assassination attempt shocked the Mafia. It proved Genovese was willing to kill bosses. Fear spread quickly. Members aligned with him out of self-preservation. Law enforcement suspected Genovese but lacked evidence. Once again, he escaped consequences. After Costello stepped aside, Vito Genovese took control of the family, later named after him. He believed he was now the ultimate Mafia ruler, the boss of bosses. Unlike Luciano, who favored cooperation, Genovese ruled through intimidation. He centralized power. Decisions flowed only through him. Dissent was punished. Several rivals were murdered or disappeared. His leadership created resentment, but fear kept people silent. Genovese believed absolute control was the only safe path. This arrogance would later be his downfall. Under Genovese's leadership, gambling operations expanded massively. Illegal casinos, betting rings, and numbers games flooded New York and beyond. He also strengthened extortion rackets targeting unions, construction companies, and businesses. Workers were threatened. Employers were forced to cooperate. Money flowed upward to Genovese. He demanded loyalty and payment. Anyone who resisted was beaten or killed. These crimes affected thousands of ordinary people. Entire industries were controlled by fear. Genovese became richer and more powerful than ever. In 1957, Genovese made a critical mistake. He organized a massive mafia meeting in Appalachian, New York. Dozens of top mob bosses attended. Local police noticed suspicious activity and raided the gathering. Mobsters fled into the woods. Many were arrested. This event exposed the mafia's existence to the public. Newspapers exploded with headlines. Genovese denied involvement, but everyone knew he organized it. This embarrassment weakened his authority. Law enforcement now openly targeted organized crime. Genovese had underestimated public exposure. After Appalachian, Genovese's enemies saw opportunity. Other mafia leaders resented his tyranny. They feared his ambition. Secretly, they began plotting against him. Unlike previous rivals, these enemies were insiders. Trust collapsed. Meetings grew tense. Everyone knew violence was coming. Genovese waited for the perfect moment. He understood that killing Costello outright would cause chaos. Instead, he planned to cripple him psychologically. This patience made Genovese extremely dangerous. In 1957, Genovese made his move. A gunman shot Frank Costello in the head outside his apartment. Miraculously, Costello survived, but survival was not victory. The message was clear. Costello stepped down from leadership.
Shortly afterward, Genovese achieved his goal without a public war. This assassination attempt shocked the Mafia. It proved Genovese was willing to kill bosses. Fear spread quickly. Members aligned with him out of self-preservation. Law enforcement suspected Genovese, but lacked evidence. Once again, he escaped consequences. After Costello stepped aside, Vito Genovese took control of the family, later named after him. He believed he was now the ultimate mafia ruler, the boss of bosses. Unlike Luciano, who favored cooperation, Genovese ruled through intimidation. He centralized power. Decisions flowed only through him. Dissent was punished. Several rivals were murdered or disappeared. His leadership created resentment, but fear kept people silent. Genovese believed absolute control was the only safe path. This arrogance would later be his downfall. Under Genovese's leadership, gambling operations expanded massively. Illegal casinos, betting rings, and numbers games flooded New York and beyond. He also strengthened extortion rackets targeting unions, construction companies, and businesses. Workers were threatened. Employers were forced to cooperate. Money flowed upward to Genovese. He demanded loyalty and payment. Anyone who resisted was beaten or killed. These crimes affected thousands of ordinary people. Entire industries were controlled by fear. Genovese became richer and more powerful than ever. In 1957, Genovese made a critical mistake. He organized a massive mafia meeting in Appalachian, New York. Dozens of top mob bosses attended. Local police noticed suspicious activity and raided the gathering. Mobsters fled into the woods. Many were arrested. This event exposed the mafia's existence to the public. Newspapers exploded with headlines. Genovese denied involvement, but everyone knew he organized it. This embarrassment weakened his authority. Law enforcement now openly targeted organized crime. Genovese had underestimated public exposure. After Appalachian, Genovese's enemies saw opportunity. Other mafia leaders resented his tyranny. They feared his ambition. Secretly, they began plotting against him. Unlike previous rivals, these enemies were insiders. Trust collapsed. Meetings became dangerous. Genovese ruled a kingdom filled with traitors. He still ordered murders, but loyalty was fading. His greatest weapon, fear, was now turning against him. In 1959, Genovese was arrested on narcotics charges. This time, it was different. Witnesses testified. Evidence stuck. Many believe other mafia leaders cooperated with authorities to remove him. Genovese was convicted and sentenced to prison. The man who ruled through fear was finally powerless. Behind bars, he tried to maintain control, but his empire slowly crumbled. His reign had ended not with bullets, but by betrayal. When Vito Genovese entered prison, many believed his reign was over. That belief was wrong. Prison did not silence him. It only changed how he ruled. From behind bars, Genovese continued to issue orders through trusted visitors, corrupt guards, and coded messages. Other inmates feared him because his influence reached far beyond prison walls. He arranged protection for allies and punishment for enemies. Even inside prison, Genovese demanded respect. He used money to buy favors and loyalty. Guards looked the other way. Fellow inmates served as messengers. The mafia family outside still treated him as a power figure, even if officially he was no longer boss. This showed how deeply his control was rooted. Prison removed his freedom, but not his fear factor. Genovese's most chilling trait was his ability to order violence while imprisoned. Several witnesses later testified that murders were planned during prison visits. He spoke carefully, never directly saying, "kill." Instead, he used phrases like, "take care of him," or "he's a problem." These coded instructions were understood clearly. Men died without Genovese ever touching a weapon. This shocked law enforcement. It proved that removing a crime boss physically did not remove their influence. Even locked away, Genovese continued shaping the underworld. Blood still flowed from his decisions. Other mafia leaders feared Genovese even after his conviction. They worried he might regain power or seek revenge. Some avoided mentioning his name. Others sent money to keep him calm. This fear came from his reputation for cruelty. Genovese never forgave betrayal. He remembered names, faces, and insults. Many believed he was waiting patiently, planning vengeance from prison. This paranoia weakened trust across mafia families. Meetings became tense. Silence replaced confidence. Genovese had turned the mafia against itself. Carlo Gambino, one of the most powerful mafia leaders, quietly benefited from Genovese's fall. Gambino disliked Genovese's arrogance and hunger for total control. While Genovese sat in prison, Gambino built alliances and expanded influence. He presented himself as calm, reasonable, and stable, the opposite of Genovese. Many believe Gambino supported efforts to keep Genovese imprisoned. This silent power shift reshaped the American mafia. Violence gave way to strategy. Genovese lost not only freedom, but relevance. As years passed, Genovese became increasingly paranoid. He trusted fewer people. He suspected betrayal everywhere. Even loyal messengers were questioned. This isolation weakened his influence. Power requires trust, and Genovese destroyed trust through fear. In prison, he replayed old betrayals endlessly. His mind became a battlefield. The man who once controlled empires now lived inside suspicion and regret. Prison life took a toll on Genovese's body. Age, stress, and illness weakened him. The once intimidating figure became physically frail. He could no longer command rooms with presence alone. This decline symbolized his fall. Power built on fear does not age well. As his body weakened, so did his reach. Younger mobsters no longer feared him the same way. Time defeated what bullets never could. Even as his power faded, Genovese attempted to reclaim relevance through intermediaries. But the mafia had moved on. New bosses preferred stability over tyranny. Genovese's name still carried weight, but not authority. His era was ending. He had become a warning, not a ruler.
Genovese's downfall taught the Mafia critical lessons. Absolute control creates enemies. Arrogance attracts attention. Violence invites betrayal. Future leaders chose subtlety. They avoided public power grabs and massive meetings like Appalachian. Genovese became a case study in how not to rule. His failure reshaped organized crime more than his success ever did. In 1969, Vito Genovese died in prison. There was no dramatic assassination, no revenge attack, just a quiet death behind bars. For a man who caused so much violence, his end was silent. He died far from the streets he controlled. This ending reflected his true fate, forgotten, contained, powerless. Vito Genovese's legacy is not glory or respect. It is fear, betrayal, and collapse. He proved that ruling through terror eventually destroys everything, including the ruler. His crimes scarred communities. His ambition destabilized the Mafia. His downfall reshaped organized crime forever. Genovese did not just fall, he warned the future. Even after Vito Genovese was removed from street leadership, his biggest criminal legacy remained the heroin trade. Long before his arrest, Genovese helped build international narcotics pipelines connecting Sicily, France, and the United States. These routes moved heroin from Europe into New York, Chicago, and other cities. Genovese publicly claimed he opposed drugs. Privately, he encouraged trusted men to profit quietly. This hypocrisy cost thousands of lives. Addiction destroyed families, neighborhoods, and entire communities. Law enforcement later realized that Genovese was one of the architects of modern organized drug trafficking. He didn't sell drugs himself, he created systems that allowed others to do it safely. This separation helped him avoid early prosecution. His role showed how mob bosses could profit from mass destruction without ever touching the poison. Genovese played a key role in what later became known as the French Connection. This was a massive heroin smuggling operation involving Corsican gangs in France and Italian mafia families in Sicily and America. Morphine base was processed in Europe and shipped to the U.S., hidden inside cargo. Genovese-approved captains distributed the drugs through mafia networks. This co-op from the streets he controlled. This ending reflected his true fate, forgotten, contained, powerless. Vito Genovese's legacy is not glory or respect. It is fear, betrayal, and collapse. He proved that ruling through terror eventually destroys everything, including the ruler. His crimes scarred communities. His ambition destabilized the Mafia. His downfall reshaped organized crime forever. Genovese did not just fall, he warned the future. Even after Vito Genovese was removed from street leadership, his biggest criminal legacy remained the heroin trade. Long before his arrest, Genovese helped build international narcotics pipelines connecting Sicily, France, and the United States. These routes moved heroin from Europe into New York, Chicago, and other cities. Genovese publicly claimed he opposed drugs. Privately, he encouraged trusted men to profit quietly. This hypocrisy cost thousands of lives. Addiction destroyed families, neighborhoods, and entire communities. Law enforcement later realized that Genovese was one of the architects of modern organized drug trafficking. He didn't sell drugs himself, he created systems that allowed others to do it safely. This separation helped him avoid early prosecution. His role showed how mob bosses could profit from mass destruction without ever touching the poison. Genovese played a key role in what later became known as the French Connection. This was a massive heroin smuggling operation involving Corsican gangs in France and Italian mafia families in Sicily and America. Morphine base was processed in Europe and shipped to the U.S., hidden inside cargo. Genovese-approved captains distributed the drugs through mafia networks. This cooperation made the Mafia richer than ever. It also made Genovese a target for federal agencies worldwide. The scale of the operation shocked investigators. It was not street crime, it was global crime. Genovese helped transform the Mafia into an international criminal corporation. After his imprisonment, the Genovese crime family did not collapse, it adapted. Leaders like Tommy Ryan and later Vincent Gigante restructured operations. They avoided
publicity and reduced violence. This survival proved how deeply Genovese had institutionalized power. The family no longer needed him personally. Ironically, this meant his removal strengthened the organization. His systems lived on, even as his authority faded. One of the most important figures to emerge after Genovese was Vincent Gigante. Gigante pretended to be mentally ill for decades, wandering streets in pajamas. This strategy confused law enforcement and delayed prosecution. Many believed this tactic was inspired by lessons learned from Genovese's downfall. Instead of brute force, Gigante used deception. The Mafia had evolved. Genovese ruled with fear. Gigante ruled with invisibility. The Genovese case taught U.S. authorities how to attack organized crime. Prosecutors realized that tax laws, narcotics charges, and conspiracy cases were more effective than murder charges. Genovese's conviction became a blueprint. This strategy later brought down figures like John Gotti and Tony Salerno. Genovese unintentionally helped law enforcement refine its weapons. When Joe Masseria testified before Congress, he named Vito Genovese directly. Masseria described Genovese as paranoid, violent, and obsessed with control. He explained how Genovese ordered murders and ruled through fear. This public confirmation shattered Mafia secrecy. Americans heard the truth from an insider. Genovese became a symbol of everything wrong with organized crime. Experts later described Genovese as a classic criminal tyrant. He trusted no one fully. He believed betrayal was inevitable. This mindset pushed him to preemptively destroy rivals. His need for dominance overpowered logic. These traits made him dangerous and unstable. His mind became his greatest enemy. After Genovese, Mafia leadership became quieter and more cautious. Leaders avoided large meetings, flashy displays, and public violence. Genovese's mistakes changed mob culture. Fear was replaced with structure. Silence replaced shouting. He became the example leaders warned against becoming. Historians do not remember Genovese as a hero or genius. They remember him as ruthless, ambitious, and self-destructive. His hunger for power destabilized the Mafia and attracted government attention. His crimes left deep scars. His fall was inevitable. Vito Genovese's name still carries weight, but not admiration. He built an empire on fear and betrayal. He destroyed enemies and allies. His story is not one of success, but of warning. Power without restraint always collapses. When Vito Genovese was finally sentenced to prison in 1959, it marked the true end of his personal control. Inside the federal prison system, Genovese was no longer the untouchable boss of New York. He was inmate number 00541-052. Although he tried to maintain influence through messengers and coded letters, prison walls limited his reach. Younger mob leaders began making decisions without him. For a man obsessed with control, this loss was psychological torture. Genovese had ruled through fear on the streets, but in prison, fear no longer protected him. Guards controlled his movements. Other inmates did not bow. His empire continued, but without him at the center. While Vito sat behind bars, other Mafia leaders moved carefully to replace him without causing internal war. Men like Thomas Tommy Ryan Eboli and later Anthony Fat Tony Salerno stepped into leadership roles. They kept Genovese's name on paper as boss, but real power shifted. This silent replacement showed how the Mafia truly worked. Loyalty existed only as long as power existed. Once Genovese was imprisoned, his authority faded quickly. This betrayal would have enraged him if he had known the full truth. Genovese's downfall became a lesson taught quietly inside mafia families. His mistakes were discussed in whispers. Too much ambition, too many enemies, too much visibility. Bosses learned that survival mattered more than dominance. Violence was still used, but carefully. Genovese had proven that ruling through fear alone attracted law enforcement attention. The mafia adapted, becoming more patient, quieter, and more business-focused. Even while in prison, Genovese's name still frightened people. Younger criminals were told stories about his brutality, saying this came from Vito could still end arguments. His reputation outlived his power. Fear, once created, is difficult to erase. This lingering influence showed how deeply his image had been burned into the underworld's memory. Prison life was not kind to Genovese. Years of stress, paranoia, and poor lifestyle choices damaged his health. He suffered from heart problems and declining strength. The man who once ordered murders with a whisper now struggled with basic tasks. This physical decline mirrored his fading influence. Power could not protect him from aging or illness. Unlike some mobsters who received constant visitors, Genovese became increasingly isolated. Fewer allies came to see him. Messages stopped arriving. This silence hurt more than violence ever could. He spent his life demanding loyalty, yet ended up alone. Prison exposed a truth Genovese had always ignored. Fear does not create real loyalty. From prison, Genovese heard rumors of how the mafia was evolving. New methods, new leaders, new rules. The organization he once dominated no longer needed him. This realization haunted him. His life's work was continuing, but his name was becoming history instead of command. Even in prison, the FBI continued monitoring Genovese. They feared he might regain influence or coordinate crimes from behind bars. Agents tracked visitors, letters, and associates. This constant attention showed how dangerous they still believed him to be. Even weakened, Genovese remained a symbol of organized crime's darkest side. Unlike some criminals who expressed regret later in life, Genovese never apologized publicly. He never admitted guilt. He never showed remorse for the lives destroyed by his actions. To the end, he believed power justified everything. This refusal to reflect defined him completely. Vito Genovese feared betrayal, weakness, and loss of control more than prison itself. In the end, he experienced all three: betrayed by allies, weakened by time, forgotten by the empire he built. His punishment was not just incarceration, it was irrelevance. As the years passed, Vito Genovese settled into a quiet, bitter routine in prison. He woke early, walked slowly, and spoke little. The fiery ambition that once drove him had burned out. Guards noted that he spent long hours thinking, often staring into space. For a man who controlled hundreds of criminals, this isolation was crushing. He no longer planned, no longer commanded. He simply existed. His final years were filled with silence, regret hidden behind pride, and memories of a life built on blood. Outside prison, the mafia continued business as usual. Gambling, extortion, and loan sharking continued without interruption. Younger leaders learned quickly that Genovese was no longer relevant. His fall taught them that no one was permanent. The underworld was not loyal to people, only to profit. Genovese became a name in history books, not a voice in meetings. Although Genovese lost direct power, the systems he helped build remained. Structured hierarchies, strict codes of silence, and centralized leadership continued. These structures allowed the mafia to survive long after his death. In this way, his legacy was embedded into the machinery of organized crime, even while his personal authority disappeared. Genovese never saw the families destroyed by his decisions. Addicts from his heroin pipelines, widows of murdered rivals, children raised without fathers. These invisible victims carried his true legacy. After Genovese was locked away, people stopped speaking his name openly. In Mafia circles, mentioning fallen bosses was considered dangerous. Silence was safer. His name became something whispered, usually followed by a warning. Younger criminals were told, "Learn from him. Power can vanish overnight." Genovese once dominated rooms with his presence. Now, silence was all that remained of his authority. Genovese did not rule through love or admiration. He ruled through fear. Men followed him because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't. He used unpredictable violence, sudden betrayals, and ruthless punishment to keep control. Fear was his currency. But fear does not last forever. Once he was gone, loyalty disappeared instantly. Unlike Luciano, who believed in structure and diplomacy, Genovese believed in domination. Luciano wanted balance. Genovese wanted obedience. This difference defined their conflict. Luciano built a system that survived him. Genovese tried to rule the system himself, and that choice ultimately destroyed him. Genovese wanted to be remembered as the undisputed boss of bosses. He wanted his name to carry weight across America. But history had other plans. Instead of a legend, he became a warning. His ambition outpaced his wisdom, and the myth he tried to build collapsed under betrayal and federal pressure. Even behind bars, Genovese never admitted guilt. He blamed everyone else, informants, rivals, the government. He never expressed remorse for the lives he ruined. Prison did not reform him. It only stripped him of power. Inside, he was the same man, proud, cold, and unwilling to accept responsibility. There was no celebration when Genovese went to prison. No speeches, no grand triumph. But law enforcement knew what they had achieved. They had removed one of the most dangerous criminal mindmasters in American history. His conviction proved that even the most powerful mob boss could fall. Genovese's downfall reshaped mafia behavior. Bosses became more cautious. Meetings became smaller. Violence became more selective. Drug trafficking was handled more quietly. His mistake, drawing too much attention, became a lesson passed down through generations of criminals. For decades, Genovese's story was studied by FBI agents. His rise, his methods, and his downfall became part of organized crime education. Agents learned how power corrupts, how informants are cultivated, and how ambition can expose even the smartest criminal. Genovese trusted no one completely. He suspected betrayal everywhere. Ironically, this paranoia created enemies. Men turned against him not because they hated him, but because they feared him. In the end, it was betrayal from within that sealed his fate. Vito Genovese was not a romantic gangster. He was not a hero. He was a man driven by control, greed, and power. He ruled through intimidation, destroyed lives without hesitation, and left behind a criminal empire that outlived him but never honored him. When Vito Genovese died in prison in 1969, there was no public mourning, no grand funeral, no powerful men rushing to honor him. In the underworld, death only matters if power still exists, and Genovese had none left. His passing was noted quietly, almost indifferently. To many mobsters, he was already dead the moment he lost control. Genovese died not in a hail of bullets, but in a prison hospital bed. No guns, no glory, just failing health and guarded silence. For a man who once ordered murders with ease, his final moments were painfully ordinary. It was a reminder that even the most feared men end quietly when stripped of power. Even after death, Genovese's reputation followed the Mafia. His name became a reference point for betrayal, ambition, and downfall. Bosses warned younger members, don't repeat Genovese's mistakes. His shadow loomed as a cautionary tale, not an inspiration. Historians later agreed that betraying Frank Costello was Genovese's turning point. Costello was respected, diplomatic, and politically protected. Removing him did not strengthen Genovese, it exposed him. By eliminating a stabilizing figure, Genovese removed his own shield. Even while he held power, other mafia families distrusted Genovese. They saw him as too aggressive, too self-focused. He violated the unwritten rule of balance. In organized crime, stability matters more than dominance, and Genovese never understood that fully. Genovese had power, but not control. He could order violence, but he couldn't command loyalty. Control comes from respect and shared interest. Power based on fear collapses the moment protection disappears. This was the weakness that destroyed him. After Genovese's conviction, rival families quietly expanded. Gambling profits increased, drug routes were reorganized. His absence created opportunity. The underworld adapts quickly, and Genovese's empire was redistributed without resistance. Movies and books often paint Genovese as a master strategist. The truth is more complex. He was intelligent, but reckless, ambitious, but impatient. His failures came not from stupidity, but from arrogance. He believed fear could replace trust. It couldn't. To investigators, Genovese represented the peak of mid-century organized crime. His conviction proved long-term surveillance worked. Informants mattered. Patience mattered. His case helped shape future federal strategies against the Mafia. Vito Genovese's story is not about glory. It is about ambition without restraint. He climbed high, ruled briefly, and fell hard. His life proves a simple truth of the underworld. Power gained through fear dies the moment fear fades. Even decades after his death, Vito Genovese's name still causes caution among organized crime researchers and old law enforcement officers. He represents a dangerous type of criminal, one who understood systems, power, and psychology. His story is often referenced not because of what he achieved, but because of how close he came to absolute control before collapsing. Genovese's criminal operations survived for decades because he built layers. He rarely handled money directly. He used intermediaries, trusted captains, and family connections. This insulation made investigations difficult. Police often knew what he was doing, but proving it in court was another battle entirely. By the time Genovese reached the top, he rarely carried weapons himself. Violence was delegated. Orders passed down quietly, and deaths happened far away from him. This separation allowed him to deny involvement while still benefiting from terror. It was efficient and morally empty. Heroin trafficking was one of Genovese's most destructive legacies. Addiction spread through neighborhoods, families collapsed, and crime increased. While Genovese counted profits, entire communities paid the price. These victims were invisible to him, numbers on a ledger, not human beings. Genovese lived in constant fear of betrayal. He suspected informants everywhere. Meetings were secretive, words were coded, and trust was minimal. Ironically, this paranoia created resentment. Men who felt constantly suspected were more likely to turn against him. Federal agents never forgot Genovese. Even after his conviction, they continued studying his methods. His case influenced surveillance laws, wiretap strategies, and informant handling. He became a permanent example inside the FBI of how organized crime evolves and how it can be dismantled. Many of Genovese's enemies never celebrated publicly, but privately they felt relief. His removal meant fewer sudden killings, fewer unpredictable decisions. Stability returned. In the Mafia world, peace is profitable, and Genovese disrupted peace. For years, Genovese believed he was untouchable. He had survived murders, wars, exile, and trials. This belief blinded him. He ignored warning signs, underestimated law enforcement, and overestimated his own control. Invincibility became his greatest illusion. Genovese had power, but lacked wisdom. He could dominate, but not unite. He could frighten, but not inspire. True leaders understand restraint. Genovese never learned when to stop pushing. That failure defined his ending. Vito Genovese's life matters because it shows the limits of fear-based power. His rise teaches how ambition builds empires. His fall teaches how arrogance destroys them. For criminals, historians, and law enforcement alike, his story remains one of the clearest lessons in the history of organized crime. After Genovese fell, younger mobsters didn't just remember his power, they studied his errors. They learned that ambition without limits attracts enemies. They saw how pushing too hard against allies brings isolation. In Mafia circles, Genovese became a lesson taught quietly. Rise carefully, never too fast, and never alone. Genovese believed fear was stronger than loyalty. In the short term, he was right. Fear forced obedience. But when his power weakened, fear vanished. Loyalty never existed to replace it. Men who follow out of fear disappear the moment fear fades. This truth defined his downfall. Informants were Genovese's greatest weakness. He created so many enemies that someone was always willing to talk. Federal agents patiently gathered fragments of information over years. One voice alone wasn't enough, but many voices together finally broke his empire. After Genovese's conviction, Mafia families became more careful with narcotics. They still trafficked drugs, but distanced top leadership from operations. Genovese showed them how dangerous direct involvement could be. His case reshaped how crime families handled risk. Genovese wanted absolute authority over all families. That dream died with him. The Mafia Commission regained balance, ensuring no single man held too much power again. His ambition frightened the entire system, and the system corrected itself. Even when victory was unnecessary, Genovese pushed forward. He fought allies, rivals, and the system itself. He never paused to protect what he already controlled. This constant aggression drained his support and exposed his operations to attack. Ironically, the crime family that still carries his name did not honor him. It honored structure, discipline, and caution, values learned from his failure. His name remained, but his leadership style was quietly abandoned. Genovese's crimes deepened suspicion toward Italian-American neighborhoods. Law-abiding families suffered scrutiny because of men like him. His actions harmed not only victims, but entire communities that wanted nothing to do with crime. History does not remember Genovese kindly. He is not seen as a builder, but a destroyer. He ruled briefly, brutally, and selfishly. His downfall was not tragic. It was inevitable. Power built on fear collapses the moment fear fades. Vito Genovese's life stands as a warning written in blood and silence. He rose through violence, ruled through fear, and fell through betrayal. His story proves one lasting truth in organized crime. The most dangerous enemy is not the police, it is unchecked ambition.